So the first thing to ask yourself is, am I approaching this and processing this like a language learner or like a native Spanish speaker? And just a heads up, like if you're still processing everything like a language learner, if you're still thinking about, okay, I'm trying to learn Spanish, I'm watching some content, but I'm still trying to learn Spanish, then you're just going to carry on having the problems that language learners have. Namely, they're trying to learn something and they won't understand fully. Now, by the way, if you don't know who I am, my name is Jonathan. In 2021, I started learning Spanish through immersion. Within 8 months, I reached conversational fluency. So I started in February 2021. I had a goal by November, which is when my birthday is, that I wanted to be fluent. And I said, you know what? If I reach this, I'm going to do a trip to Spain. I'm going to only speak in Spanish. And I documented it on my Instagram. It's still there, by the way, if you want to have a look. So I went to like Madrid and I was just enjoying myself speaking to people in Spanish. Then I went then I went to Barcelona as well. Really good times, by the way, really good times. And then since then, I've done some interviews with a few of the, let's say, the goats in the learning Spanish industry. So Pablo from Dreaming Spanish, this did an interview with him. I also actually went to Spain recently and I met him in person, which was great. And then also the main man, Mike Ben, big shout out to him by the way as well. These are the guys that helped me with my journey when I was like learning Spanish as well. And then since then as well, I've also been able to, I met my partner who's from Spain, from Barcelona, and we pretty much only just speak in Spanish. And I only really say that to say that it's been a few years now since I've been able to confidently say that, okay, I'm a Spanish speaker. But before I became a Spanish speaker, let's say, I don't know if I'd say externally, I'd already reached a point internally where I already qualified myself as a Spanish speaker. Now, what does that have anything to do with you watching some content and you feel like, "Do you know what, I've watched like the language learner content and I understand it, but it's getting a bit boring. So I try and watch the native content and now it's like it's not comprehensible enough. So the comprehensible input isn't really working. I'm not really too sure what I should do." It has everything to do with that because if you've reached a point where you feel like language learning videos, specifically for people learning Spanish, is a bit too basic for you. So you understand a high percentage and it's getting a bit boring. And now you need to transition to native content. I want you to give yourself to the permission to view yourself like a Spanish speaker. Like, this isn't me trying to learn Spanish anymore. I speak Spanish. Like, you speak Spanish. You can say that to yourself. And the reason why I want you to make that distinction is because having that mind frame will switch your mind into the gear of number one, forgiving yourself for not understanding specific videos because nobody cares, and it will give your mind. It'll be like it will make your mind more fertile to the seeds of new information in Spanish. What do I mean? So, for example, let's say you're like me, like your native language is English, you learn in Spanish, but your native language is English. And let's say you were to be watching a video in English for native English speakers. Let's say like, I don't know, like an Elon Musk video talking about like the rockets and like the Tesla factory and how we need to increase the, I don't know, percentage, whatever it is. And you know how he sometimes speaks and you don't really know what he's talking about. Like, genuinely just ask yourself, what would you do in that situation? Like, would that be something that would make you reconsider, wow, like, should I be watching this content? Is this too complex? Is this me? Like, am I really good enough at English? I don't know. I thought I was good at English because I was watching some content last week, but I just watched this video from Elon and it's too complex for me. Like, is this good? Should I don't know. Maybe I should just stop learning English. Or would you just be like, well, okay, I watched the video. I didn't understand some stuff. If I really care, I'll just research the stuff, understand what it means, and be like, oh, okay, fair enough. Or if I don't care enough, like I'm just watching a short video, he says some stuff that I don't understand, I'll just be like, okay, I don't really care, and I'll just carry on with my day today, and I won't even research it. Either way, it's fine. You can research it if you want to. You can leave it if you want to. But either way, you wouldn't see that as an attack on your identity as an English speaker. And what I'm trying to get at is that we want to get to the same point with you learning Spanish. Like, if you're watching content in Spanish and you don't understand it, that's fine. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter. Because if you just carry on watching content and you're someone that's watching content because you like to watch content like a native speaker does, then yeah, I mean, there's going to be things you don't understand. With time, you'll pick some of them up. With time, excellent, you'll get more exposure to the same thing in different contexts and it'll kind of, you acquire it. Or you might say, do you know what? This thing keeps coming up. Like, for example, the other week, you might remember like Spain had this lockdown, not lockdown, sorry, like a power off, blackout throughout the whole of Spain and I think some parts of Portugal as well. And then after the president was speaking about the issue, and he was using one word, and it was like suministros. And I was like, what does that even mean? And by the way, this is me after years of of like being a Spanish speaker. And this is probably like a basic word by the way. It is something that I'm sure there's some people that you might be watching this. You might not necessarily have the level of Spanish that I have, but you might know what that means. And I was like, what does that even mean, by the way? I've heard it a few times, but I don't know what it means. So I just researched it and I found it means like supply. So it means like, okay, the supply of power, the supply of electricity, los suministros. Makes sense. I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. And now that's probably going to stick in my mind because I specifically remember the context in which I learnt it. But the point is, who really cares? And that wasn't something that challenged me as a Spanish speaker. It wasn't like a, oh raw, maybe I'm not that good at Spanish as I thought. Maybe I should go back because like if and this is the crux, like the way that we've been taught to learn through immersion is that you can only learn if you understand like a big percentage of what you're watching. So if I don't understand like 80 to 90% of the content, then maybe that isn't like I'm not really using my time wisely and I need to go back to other content. But then the other content is too boring for me and it's like, what do I do? Just relax, take it easy. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Like as long as you're enjoying the content, and I always say, just optimize for enjoyment. Because when it comes down to it, language learning is just building a relationship. If you're trying to get to the point where you can understand Spanish, understand native speaking, and you can speak Spanish fluently, that requires you to have a very intimate relationship with Spanish. And as long as you're spending more time with Spanish in his or her natural habitat, natural context, yeah, you are going to be building the relationship bit by bit. Now, it is true that depending on how you're spending the time, you might learn quicker, you might pick up new things quicker. But the challenge with that is that depending on who you are as a person, like you might be the type of person that you really like to study language, you might like to study rules, grammar, vocab, and you might be the type of person that, when it comes to watching content for hours on end, it's not really the type of thing you're drawn to. Me personally, I can watch content for ages. I'm a binge watcher of whatever it is. So based on that, if we're following the immersion route of watching content, and I'm the type of person that can stay focused, locked in, watching something for hours, I might be able to use the immersion method to learn quicker. Like I might just personally, and this is why it's a personal thing, but I might just take in at a faster rate than you. That's fine. You might be able to process different grammatical rules at a faster rate than I might. That's fine. But this leads on to my second point when it comes to what to do. And it's to understand and ask yourself the question, who am I comparing myself to? Because what we find now in the language learning industry is like a lot of people posting there, okay, this is my 300 hour update. This is my 400-hour update. This is my 1000-hour update. And I understand the premise, but I'm beginning to see that there's this like thought process, or the way that people are now approaching language learning is that we're like, okay, let me obsess about the hours that I've spent and where I should be in comparison to the hours that I've spent. Now, when I learned Spanish, I didn't track anything because I didn't even know that that was a thing. Like I was just watching content because I was like, oh yeah, I want to learn Spanish, and I just fell into a point where I was just enjoying Spanish content, and I wasn't even tracking the hours. I wasn't tracking the hours, and I feel like today, with the way that language learning is taught in terms of the immersion, that is seen as, what do you mean you weren't tracking? Like how are you supposed to learn um Spanish without tracking each individual hour and knowing, okay, I need at 600 hours, I'm supposed to start talking at 700. And I get the premise. I get the premise. But we have to ask ourselves at a fundamental level, if language learning, and this for me is the fundamental, if fundamentally language learning is just building a relationship with Spanish, when was the last time I tracked the hours that I spent with a friend? Like, think about it. Even when you're learning your native language, and I get it was different, I get not everything applies directly, but genuinely, when was the last time that you thought, okay, let me just calculate how many hours I've spent listening to English content, and let me be able to, based on that, let me see if I can work out where I should be. And the fact that I watched this video and I didn't understand what that means about me as an English learner. Nobody really does that because it doesn't matter. So I feel like one thing we can do is look at, okay, who are we comparing ourselves to? And if I am going to compare myself to anyone, it's not going to be the other people learning Spanish that, okay, within 1,000 hours he was able to do an interview, and I'm done 1,000 hours and I'm not able to do an interview. Like, if I'm going to compare myself to anyone, I'm going to compare myself to a kid that is a native Spanish speaker. Why would I do that? Because I don't know about yourself, but you know me, yeah. I distinctively remember when I was young and I was watching movies, like, just like, for example, Iron Man, where it's like an action movie, but then there's periods of time where they're talking, like the adults are talking, and I just didn't understand. I remember this specifically when I was like 6 or 7 or 5 or wherever it is. And I used to think, wow, like, I don't understand what these guys are talking about. But it was never me questioning, like, wow, am I really, like, when it comes to English, is that a reflection of my English skills? It was just like, I don't really know what these guys are talking about. But anyways, it's fine. Like, if I just carry on watching, they're gonna start fighting and it'll be interesting again. And I want us to I think about, if I'm to compare myself to like a 5-year-old kid watching a movie, then we wouldn't even expect that that kid's going to understand everything in the movie, but we wouldn't then question, oh, whether that person's actually a native Spanish or English speaker, if that makes sense. Like, I hope I'm explaining myself correctly. My point is that if we're comparing to kids that speak that language, we have the understanding that, oh yeah, like, with time he's going to get more understand. He'll learn these words as he goes. He'll get more exposure to some of these words and concepts, and over time he's going to be able to understand more of these complex ideas in movies or in any form of content. And I feel like if we can, and especially this is what happened with me, if I can just accept that, okay, this is going to take time. I don't necessarily need to focus on how much I understand now, but I just need to focus on how well and how consistently am I continuing to develop the relationship. Simple. Simple. Now it's true. Like, once you find some content that you don't understand, maybe you can do like word farming. You can look at, okay, let me pull up my Anki deck and put the words in there, and I'm gonna make sure I learn the words that I don't know, and that's gonna be quicker. Or you might get other people on the other hand that are like, no, 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 never do any studying, just do more input. And I mean, either or, I feel like there's that whole war going on in the language learning industry at the moment, which, while I was there warring and beefing, let's just go to another way and just be like, do you know what? It doesn't really matter, because there's people that have become fluent in Spanish by doing all the Anki stuff. Great. But there's also people that have become fluent in Spanish without doing that Anki stuff. So at a fundamental level, that isn't the key. Because whilst there's people that have done it this way, there's people that have done it that way and it worked. There is no one that speaks fluently a language without having a deep relationship with that language, whether they know it or not. It has to happen. So let's just focus on that. Like, just focus on, okay, how can I develop the relationship with the language? What is what I would want to do? How can I personally, knowing myself, allow myself to spend more time with the language? If that does mean that I need to find a type of content that will allow me to enjoy the content without understanding as much of the content, then I do that. I do that. And this is the third point, by the way. We need to put ourselves in a position whereby we can develop a skill which is crucial for language acquisition via immersion. And the skill is the ability to spend a lot of time consuming content with the feeling of ambiguity. Like, I don't fully understand it, but that doesn't matter. And the more you can spend time with that feeling of ambiguity and still enjoy the content, like finding other ways to enjoy the content outside of understanding every single word that the person says, the quicker you can process, because the longer you can endure. Now, that is a skill. It is a muscle that needs to be trained. And the only way you can train that is via practice. Some people, and I would argue maybe myself, Like some people will have a bit more of a natural tendency to not necessarily need the full context of what's being said to enjoy it. And that might be to do with like my personality or whatever it is, or your prior experiences, fine. But at a foundational level, everybody has the ability to do it. But it's about how willing am I to watch content? Can I watch hours of content without fully understanding everything and be like, yeah, that was excellent? Like I would focus on that more than I would focus on, oh wow, like this content is like 70% um comprehensible for me. And then if I was to watch something that'd be 90%, then I probably won't learn. Like forget that. Like just if I could just focus on, okay, I don't really understand what's going on here, but this is how it's supposed to be. I already know that I am someone that qualifies to be a Spanish speaker. This is one of the topics that I don't fully understand. Excellent. I'm just going to carry on watching and see what happens. If you can do that, because every single time, like if you're watching, if you're consuming content in Spanish, something is happening. You might not see it, you might not feel it. There might not be a scoreboard that's saying, okay, great, you've just increased your acquisition of the overall Spanish language by 0.1%. There is no one that's going to tell you that. There is no way of checking, but something is happening. It's just a law. So the longer you can stick in that place whereby the seed has been planted and the flower is growing and you're just watering it, the more you can just continually water it, at some point, you're going to come back to that same content that you were struggling with and realize that, oh, wow, I can actually understand it now. Happens to everyone. But that won't happen if you're focusing too much on the percentage of the content that you understand. If you're focusing too much on how many hours have I done versus my ability to understand this, and if you're focusing too much on, okay, great, like as a language learner or as a C1, B1, B2, I should be able to understand this content, but then I'm watching this and I don't understand it, so there's a problem. If that's where your focus is, you're making language learning way, 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 way more complex and way more tedious and cumbersome than it needs to be. And that is the core challenge rather than the content issue of like, oh, this isn't fully comprehensible for me. It doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, you might be able to like get like a 2%, 5% increase in the rate in which you understand. But at the end of the day, there's like this quote that I don't know what the book is from, but it says, look, he who loves running will run further than the person who loves the destination. So if you're just trying to like maximize a thing to learn, oh, like, I'm trying to get to uh Spanish, so I need to do like make sure the content is this way or this way, then yeah, I mean that might work for a little bit, but long term, the person that's just like, "Do you know what, I just watch content in Spanish because I'm one of the people that is a Spanish speaker, and so we just watch content in Spanish. And I like this niche. I like videos about YouTube, about football. I like videos about basketball. I like videos about gaming, and I just watch gaming videos in Spanish. And I just enjoy myself doing it. Or I like movies, whatever it is. Sometimes I might like movies. I like other movie. I like series. Sometimes I switch it up, and I'm just flowing. Like I'm just flowing. I'm just flowing like I would with making a friend. If you can get to that point, then you forget that you're learning Spanish. You start to actually act like a native Spanish speaker, and all of these problems about, oh yeah, like the content isn't really fully comprehensible for me, they go out the window. But then that's when the actual Spanish acquisition comes in because you're acting like an actual Spanish speaker. So that's my two piece on the topic. If you have any questions, drop them below. I will answer any questions by probably making another video like this about those topics. And I'll see you in the next video.